homelessness epidemic is inescapable.
Enforcing its ban on homeless people.
Is there nowhere else to go? Is there just nowhere else that they want to go?
Our city deserves to hold people accountable to bad behavior.
Voters fed up with rising homelessness.
Clear them out.
The push to ship out, arrest, and get homeless people out of sight is gaining alarming support across the U.S.
Criminalizing sleeping in public spaces.
And in the coming months, protections against criminalization may be overturned in the Supreme Court.
Do I protect myself from the elements and risk going to jail, or do I not and risk hypothermia and dying?
So is it cruel and unusual punishment? The Supreme Court will tackle that question.
At the center is a small town in Oregon.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Grants Pass.
Invisible People founder Mark Horvath investigates what's really going on in Grants Pass right now.
We get a ticket just for trying to live.
30 citations in a year and a half.
I've been to jail 5 times just this year.
So this park is probably the most controversial.
They hit me with a stick. They wanted to drag them out and beat them.
Families out here sleeping in tents.
Because this ruling will determine whether cities can arrest homeless people across the country.
If that's allowed, many cities will try to run all of the homeless people out of their community.
The stakes can be higher.
We will ban urban camping. Violators of these bans will be arrested. We will then open up large parcels of inexpensive land where the homeless can be relocated.
Rather than addressing the structural inequities causing homelessness, many politicians from both parties and at all levels ignore proven solutions to homelessness, opting instead for a punitive response that will only make homelessness worse and hurt all of us. Criminalization punishes the one group of people who have no power to fix the crisis.
The DPPD had my stuff thrown away, and in one of my totes was my son's urn. My son's forever gone, and I only have a piece of him, an urn necklace that I keep dear to my heart, you know, like, that's things I can't get back. It makes it really hard to want to keep going on. All I can say to people is, don't forget what it is to be human. Be kind. We're all just trying to survive.
If your issue is that Black Lives Matter, if you care about the experience of LGBTQ people, if you care about people living with disabilities, if you care about the elderly, all of these traditionally marginalized communities are going to be impacted. If those are your issues, this is your issue.
I am not just a number that's written on the t-shirts of over 15,000 teddy bears. These teddy bears representing over 15,000 Palestinian children killed in Gaza. Now, the aim of this art installation is to give people a sense of scale, because often the stories, the individual stories of tragedy, get lost in numbers. Now, we've been speaking to the artist Bashir Mohammed, who tells us that these teddy bears, all very individual, and standing on these concrete blocks, the grey personifying, showing the rubble that Gaza has become, and the red representing blood.
These kids who are not lost but killed actually due to the Israeli occupation over Palestine have names, have identities, have a homeland called Palestine. For you think about numbers. Numbers are nothing. You would say, oh wow, it's a big number, but you will never see it unless you create it somehow and you show it actually for the society.
Now, the artist hopes that when people come here, they'll take their time to look at the faces of these teddy bears, each of them very individual. Some of them are looking up at the sky, and the effect he hopes that this has is to humanize the children of Gaza. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera, Doha.
Iran launched about 200 missiles at Israel Tuesday, filling the skies with sounds of sirens and explosions, and risking a wider war in the Middle East.
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event.
You've got 3 wars of attrition going on, one between Israel and Hamas, one between Israel and Hezbollah, and the main event, of course, which I'm afraid we're going to see more of, is the one between 2 states, between Israel and Iran.
Here's what led to Iran's latest attack on Israel, and what could happen next. In July, Israel killed Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in a strike after he attended the inauguration of Iran's new president in Tehran. And in September, the Israeli military also killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in an airstrike on southern Beirut. Iran backs both Hamas and Hezbollah.
They responded because of the credibility problem that they have. Their main proxy, in whom they've invested billions of dollars, has taken a very serious hit.
The Israeli strike on Nasrallah followed weeks of intelligence operations and bombing campaigns targeting Hezbollah, including detonating thousands of pagers used by the group's members. This week, the Israeli military sent troops into Lebanon and said it had been conducting secret raids across the border for the past year. Iran had repeatedly promised a tough response to Israel's escalating attacks, but did not retaliate until Tuesday. Tensions had been building for months. In April, Iran launched its first direct attack on Israel from Iranian territory, with more than 300 drones and missiles. Some analysts said with its attack, Iran was likely seeking to look tough, but not provoke a broad retaliation. The Pentagon said that Israel intercepted a majority of the missiles, and that there was minimal damage on the ground.
איראן עשתה הערב טעות גדולה, והיא תשלם על כך. המשטר באיראן לא מבין את נחישותנו להגן על עצמנו, ואת נחישותנו לגמול לאויבינו.
Israel didn't provide details on how or when it would respond. President Biden said the U.S. military actively supported Israel's defense Tuesday, and he's in discussions about a response.
Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
I can't see the United States participating offensively in what the Israelis are going to do. Defensively, yes. Battening down the hatches to protect its own forces. Considering the possibility, should this escalate, of some kind of offensive action.
Right now, there are so many roads that are still closed or are non-existent, leading up to these mountain towns that have been trapped and cut off from supplies for days. While machinery has not been able to reach them, these families are now relying on mule power to save them. This is not your typical ride through the Blue Ridge. Rather, it's an attempt to get help to families stuck on the mountain. This video is from Cajun Navy 2016 from Louisiana, and it's showing the Mountain Mule Parker Ranch, carrying supplies including insulin to a family in desperate need. Just one of a few dozen trips they'll make on the backs of the only tool that can get up there.
Right now, I mean, they're in mud and crumbling roads, and they are super sure-footed, and they can pick their way through.
Michelle Toberger and her husband own the ranch in Reeford. They saw the images pouring out of western North Carolina. The couple accepted it could be days to weeks before vehicles could get supplies to families.
He needed to get the places where he knew the mules could get into that other things couldn't. That's what he specializes in.
So they loaded up 9 of their finest, headed to the foothills, saddled up, and set off. Those supplies coming from donation drops like this one on Tuesday in Rowan County. Some drove for more than an hour to donate, like Taylor Edwards and her daughter Emery.
We love mules, and we know that they are the all-terrain vehicle of the equine world. But I've grown up going to those mountains, and so I recognize scenes and areas that are now unrecognizable.
A lifeline arriving soon to a place machines cannot touch. But this is just the first hoof print in a larger journey.
Now I just can't imagine stopping until we've helped enough.
The mission gets supplies to people that desperately need it. I asked if they have plans to rescue anyone that is currently trapped. They say, well, that's not in the cards for them. If somebody desperately needs to get out, they're going to find a way. In Cleveland, Daniel Pierce, Queen City News.
Thousand Palestinians face one of the single biggest expulsion decisions since the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories began.
هاي قصة عن القوة.
أنا اسمي باسل.
مسافر يطا هي المكان اللي كبرت فيه. بداية تصويري هي بداية نهايتنا.
جرافات
48 اللي لا يهودي
في صوت بيطلع يعني مش ناس قاعدين يعني فيش بني ادمين.
شو دخلوا؟
This is what's happening in my village now. Soldiers are everywhere.
سلم يا باشا.
بيكون كثير حلو إذا بصير استقرار. بعدين انتوا بتيجوا تزوروني مش انا بزوركم ولا لا؟ ولا شو تفكر؟ لو انت مكاني شو تفكر؟
I would like to just go over two items that I would like particularly new entrants to the stock market to ponder just a bit before they try and do 30 or 40 trades a day in order to profit from what looks like a very easy game. So on March 31st, I ran off a list of the 20 largest companies in the world by stock market value. Those names, a good many of which you'll be familiar to, they were led by Apple. It's over $2 trillion. And it went down to the number 20th was worth 330 odd billion. But those are the 20 largest companies in the world by market value on March 31st. The top 6 companies, 5 of them are American. So when you hear people say that America it's not working very well or something of the sort, in the whole world, of the 6 top companies in value, 5 of them are in the United States. Imagine thinking of 5 of the top 6 companies in the world ending up with a country that started with 0.5% of the population just a few hundred years ago. But what I would like you to do is look at that list and then make an estimate, make your own guess. How many of those companies are going to be on the list 30 years from now? I would now invite you to look at slide 2, which goes back a little more than 30 years, and look at the top 20 from 1989. And if you look at the top 20 from 1989, there's 2 things that should grab your interest, at least 2. None of the 20 from 30 years ago are on the present list. None. 0. But it is a reminder of what extraordinary things can happen, things that seem obvious to you. 1989 was not the Dark Ages. I mean, we weren't just discovering capitalism or anything else. We were just as sure of ourselves as investors and Wall Street was in 1989 as we are today. But the world can change in very, very dramatic ways. If you thought you knew a lot about which ones to pick, or the person that you had hiring, you were paying a lot of money to, had all these ideas, and they could tell you their best ideas in 1989 did not necessarily do that well. Secondly, people get enormously attracted to various industries. I mean, I think if a company says it's in the XYZ industry and that's a popular one, you can sell IPOs, you can sell SPACs, people disregard sales numbers, earnings numbers. It's just, it's the place to be. So there were at least 2,000 companies that entered the auto business because it clearly had this incredible future. And of course, you remember that in 2009, there were 3 left, 2 of which went bankrupt. So there is a lot more to picking stocks than figuring out what's going to be a wonderful industry in the future.
A historic new era in Mexico, as Claudia Sheinbaum was sworn in as the nation's first female president. Sheinbaum, a 62-year-old climate scientist and a former mayor of Mexico City, started her 6-year term addressing a room of more than 100 high-profile invitees, including U.S. First Lady Jill Biden, promising to strengthen women's rights and Mexico's economy.
Promoveremos la inversión pública y la inversión privada. Lo digo con toda claridad. Tengan la certeza que las inversiones de accionistas nacionales y extranjeros estarán seguras en nuestro país.
Sheinbaum, the country's first president of Jewish heritage, made history in June when she won a landslide election as a member of the governing Morena party, which was founded by her mentor and predecessor Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
I think what we've seen so far, based on her speeches and based on the appointment of cabinet members, is quite a bit of continuity with what AMLO did over the last 6 years.
Though crime rates remained high during his term, Obrador left office with nearly 80% approval rating, due in part to policies and programs that targeted poverty. Sheinbaum vowing to carry on his biggest projects, which include the hawks, not bullets approach of avoiding violent confrontations with drug cartels.
No regresará la irresponsable guerra contra el narco.
But she will also inherit a nation struggling with a weakening currency and a rising budget deficit.
As President Sheinbaum mentioned during her inaugural speech, about 10 million people were lifted out of poverty. These are clear indications that the emphasis on the disadvantaged sectors of society will continue.
With the U.S. presidential election just weeks away, all eyes on how this new administration will navigate the results and maintain a relationship with its largest trading partner.
Claudia Sheinbaum will govern from the building behind me, Palacio Nacional, and her relationship with the United States will really depend on what happens on November 5, when Americans elect their next president. The issues, though, no matter the results of that election, will remain the same: immigration, trade, and the war on drugs. Tom?
Indras net is first and foremost a very beautiful image. It's used both in Hinduism and in Buddhism to talk about the interconnectedness of the micro and the macro. It's about cause and effect, it's about symbiosis, it's about interdependence. Considering it's thousands of years old, I really thought it was a very prescient metaphor for a lot of contemporary practices now. So rather than using very heavy-hitting terms like emergency and climate consciousness and planetary thinking, I thought of using something gentler and more poetic that could really encapsulate the current moment but open it up for artistic dialogue and artistic inclusion. We have 19 artists in this group presentation. I'm extremely excited to bring all of these different voices to London. Indras net is a net which has a sense of ethics and accountability at its core. There are questions related to land, to ancestry, to indigeneity, to rights, to sovereignty, to memory, to materiality, to objecthood, to even ideas of science fiction, of cybernetics, of the future. And in all of this, I really think of these artists as performing many roles. They are historians, they are archaeologists, they wear many hats. They are not contemporary artists in the traditional sense of having a studio practice, but they really live in the world at large. Artists have really risen to the occasion and been extremely generous with making new work, drawings, videos, installations, photographs for this section. I really hope that audiences, when they come to engage with this work, whether it's virtually or in person, will come away feeling very inspired. Perhaps they've come across an artist that they were unfamiliar with, a practice, an idea, a story, that they really understand that the world that we live in is multidimensional and very complex, but it's not a world without hope.
Welcome back. Something unusual has been happening in the Saharan desert. Did you like the way I did that?
Is it Saharan or Saharan?
I'm saying Saharan because it sounds
Can I
very
say Saharan?
European. Rain.
Okay, Saharan.
An unusual amount of rain has fallen in the usual arid hot desert, creating patches of green amid the dust and the sand. Dave, the Science Pro, here to explain. Call it what you want.
Okay, fine. Now, this region, the Saharan desert, was permanently home to lush greenery about 5,000 to 11,000 years ago. Wasn't always a desert, so understand that to begin with. From July into September, rainfall north of the equator in Africa increases. And then what it does is those little waves will move off the coast of Africa in an area that we call the Intertropical Convergence Zone. And typically, those tropical waves will spit off the coast of Africa every few days. However, this year, that intertropical convergence zone, we call it the ITZZ, was a little bit further north, okay? So as this rain developed, it started to push those waves north, and they would come out over cooler water, cooler air, and they wouldn't develop. And for a while, we were trying to figure out, like, what is going on? And then all of a sudden, we realized that this intertropical convergence zone was too far to the north. So it was actually raining in the Saharan desert. The problem is the increased rainfall put 4 million people in 14 different countries in Africa at risk. And many of those areas received a year's worth of rain in just a few days. Now, we saw what it did to the tropics as it really kind of quieted down the hurricane season. And what's also fascinating is that normally dry lakes in the Sahara actually filled up from all of this rain that they typically just aren't supposed to get, and just a little bit further north. Record high ocean temperatures is one of the main reasons that the scientists are saying, you know what, we just feel these record high ocean temperatures forced that ITCZ north, even by 50 to 100 miles, and that made a huge difference not only in the main development region for the hurricane season, but for the Sahara Desert. And you can see by the first pictures that we showed, it doesn't take much rain to start making the green come out. Now, I anticipate that this will go back to normal, but that is something that scientists are going to have to study all winter long. Was it just the extra warm water? What other reasons had this happen? But the Sahara Desert, at least part of it, Russell, green with vegetation late this summer. Very, very, very ironic. And very weird.
Fascinating. Okay.
वो यही है, भगवान कहते हैं कि भाई एक दिन हम सबको संसार से जाना है, लेकिन हमने तैयारी ऐसे कर रखी कि हमें कहीं जाना ना पड़े। हम उसी के लिए कर्म करते हैं, भाई बैंक बैलेंस अच्छा हो, चाहे गाड़ी हो जाए, घर हो जाए, हर चीज हम अपने आप को, मतलब हर एक ऐशो आराम की जिंदगी से हम अपने आप को सराउंड कर लेते हैं, ये सोचते हुए हमें कहीं नहीं जाना होगा। लेकिन एक दिन जिसने घर बनाया है वो उस घर में रहने वाला नहीं है। एक दिन जिसने फैक्ट्री बनाई है वही फैक्ट्री बनाने वाला, उसमें काम करने वाला नहीं, क्योंकि एक दिन हमें संसार में ये सब चीजों को छोड़ करके जाना है। इसलिए महान पुरुष कहते हैं जितना मोह होगा उतना खिंचाव, उतना लगाव संसार के प्रति होगा, उतना दुख होगा इस संसार को छोड़ते हुए, जितने आपने बंधन बांध लिए। और जब बंधन को काटोगे तब बिना किसी हिचक के हम आगे जो सफर है उसमें जाने के लिए तैयार हो। तो वही सबसे बड़ी परीक्षा है, अंतगता सोमता। हमारे महान पुरुषों ने ये बड़े सूक्ष्म और सुंदर तरीके से समझाया कि अंत समय जिस चीज का चिंतन करोगे उसी परिस्थिति को प्राप्त करोगे। अंत समय में हमने संसार का चिंतन किया, अपने भोगों का चिंतन किया, क्योंकि हमने भोगी किए, संसार में हम भोगी बने तो संसार में भोगी किया। तो कहने का अभिप्राय यही है कि अगर हम संसार में योग की क्रिया से अपने बंधनों को काटेंगे तब जो अंतगता सुमता है, अंत समय में प्रभु का चिंतन होगा, और प्रभु का चिंतन करते हुए अगर हम संसार को छोड़ेंगे तभी हम संसार के प्रभावों से मुक्त हैं। तो गुरु महाराज जी को बंधी तोड़ भी कहा जाता है इसी के लिए, क्योंकि वो बंधन को तोड़ते हैं। ऐसे ही गुरु महाराज जी ने हमें ज्ञान दिया है, उस ज्ञान के रास्ते पे हमें चलना है, उन संस्कारों को अपने अंदर रोपित करना है, एक संकल्प को अपने अंदर बांधना है, क्योंकि जब तक दृढ़ संकल्प नहीं है अपने आप को जानने का, तब तो बाबा ये मन भी तो बड़ा चतुर है। मन नहीं चाहता कि भाई अगर ये व्यक्ति निर्मोही हो जाए तो मन का क्या काम। तो मन भी अपनी महत्वाकांक्षा को पूरा करता है। मन महत्वाकांक्षा को कैसे पूरेगा? बंधन बांध करके। मन कहीं लग जाता है, फिक्सेट हो जाता है, हम उसी का चिंतन करते रहते हैं, चिंतन और चीजों के बारे में भूल जाते हैं। तो ये नहीं कि मन अपना काम छोड़ देगा, मन को सही जगह लगाओ। मन अभी संसार में भटक रहा है, संसार के मोह में भटक रहा है, इसको अपनी श्वासों में लगाओ तो यही मन क्या है? मोक्ष का कारण भी है, यही मन बंधन का कारण भी है।
He can sit, stay, and even shake, but he is not your average canine. Meet Spot, the LAPD's newest mechanical crime fighter. Police say the robo-dog enhances officer safety, but opponents fear its impact on vulnerable communities.
KTLA's Jennifer McGraw shows us how this high-tech hound is protecting lives and property.
Meet Spot, similar to a 70-pound golden retriever in ability and stature, but some would say the futuristic hound is quite shocking to the eye. A robot on LAPD's staff that can do what others can't.
The arm can open doors, it could pick up objects, it could drag up to 50 pounds.
And walk around just about anything.
In, say, a cluttered room, where some of our ground robotics couldn't do that in the past.
Deputy Chief David Kalawaski is the commanding officer for counterterrorism and special operations in the department.
The main reason that we acquired Spot is to save lives.
The LAPD deploying a robot dog.
Months ago on a Metro bus, a barricaded suspect stopped traffic. After exhausting all efforts, the LAPD deployed Spot and finding an armed man passed out.
They identified a weapon by his feet, and the Spot came up and safely took the weapon away from him.
But there is some controversy surrounding Spot. Some are scared of it. They say he looks intimidating. Others fear it could be used for militarization, but that's not the case.
The manufacturer would forbid us from using this technology if we made any attempt to weaponize it.
There are concerns with other robotic companies. For example, in Ukraine, they've unleashed the robot dogs of war, not for combat per se, but to detect dangerous situations, including mines and Russian forces, which some have major concerns for future warfare. For now, here in Los Angeles, there's another worry. Some fear Spot can negatively impact communities of color, targeting, profiling, and terrorizing.
I think that people are concerned in our communities because Spot follows a long and flawed history of predictive policing in Los Angeles.
Brittany Freedom is an assistant professor for the Department of Sociology at USC.
Are we using the same data that the LAPD used for previous programs like Operation Laser, which were racist programs and classed programs? So I think the concerns are valid and they're based in a history of experience.
The LAPD hopes to alleviate fears, saying the manufacturing company Boston Dynamics does not allow for facial recognition and will never arm Spot with weapons. In fact, unlike other dogs, Spot doesn't have a mind of its own. Humans are in complete control of operating the four-legged robot. Spot was actually donated, but some would argue at the price tag of $280,000, there's not enough data to know its effectiveness. In fact, there have been issues. In New York, the robo-dog's purpose was cut short after it was deployed in a public housing building in Manhattan. People describing the device as emblematic of how overly aggressive the police can be when dealing with poor communities, according to the New York Times. There's other uses for the DigiDog during natural disasters.
Last year, they had a building collapse, and the New York Fire Department utilized Spot to help identify potential survivors.
The LAPD hoping to remain transparent with the community and only using Spot in life or death situations for them and Los Angelinos. At the Elysian Park Police Academy, Jennifer McGraw, KTLA 5 News.